Hey, it's Mike Hambright with FlipNerd.com. Welcome back for another exciting episode. Today I have with me Randy Hughes, who is Mr. Land Trust. He's a master at land trust and using real estate investment to protect your assets. Before we get started with Randy and learning more about land trusts, let's take a moment to recognize our featured sponsors. RealtyMogul.com is an online marketplace for real estate investing, connecting borrowers and capital from accredited and institutional investors. Get a rehab loan fast and close in as little as 10 days. Rates start as low as 9%. We'd also like to thank National Real Estate Insurance Group, the nation's leading provider of insurance to the residential real estate investor market. From individual properties to large-scale investors, National Real Estate Insurance Group is ready to serve you. Please note, the views and opinions expressed by the individuals in this program do not necessarily reflect those of FlipNerd.com or any of its partners, advertisers, or affiliates. Please consult professionals before making any investment or tax decisions, as real estate investing can be risky. Hey, Randy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So we just found out that you're from Illinois, really a few hours from where I grew up, but I don't really interview a lot of folks or even meet a lot of folks from Illinois, at least outside of Chicago, I should say. So. Well,
there's not many of us left. There's a big exodus going on here.
Yeah, one of those blue states. So we won't get too political, but anyway. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on the show. You operate in a very interesting area that I think there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of lack of knowledge as to how land trusts work. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of introduce yourself, and tell us how you got into being focused on land trusts.
Well, I've been a real estate investor for the last 42 years. I started buying single-family houses when I was in college, and I probably owned 10 or 15 single-family houses before I woke up one morning and thought, oh my gosh, anybody on the planet can go down to the courthouse records and look up that I'm the owner of these properties. And not only total strangers, but the tenants in the properties. And I started investigating other ways of holding title other than in my own personal name. And certainly all your listeners know that there are corporations and LLCs. There are many ways of holding title, but I zeroed in on the land trust as the ideal way to hold title. That's not to say I don't use those other entities, but to hold title, I only use a land trust.
Okay. And why don't you talk a little bit about the, I guess I'd like to get into the pros and cons, but just to clarify, so your properties are still owned by another type of legal entity from tax perspective?
Well, let's get into that. From a tax perspective, a land trust is a pass-through entity. The IRS just they close their eyes and say, we don't recognize a land trust. The beneficiary of the land trust will report all tax benefits.
Okay.
Good or bad benefits. So the IRS, from an IRS standpoint, you own the property and you deduct all the standard deductions. But from a legal standpoint, you do not own the property. The trustee of your trust owns the property and you own the trust.
Individually, or you have an entity that owns the trust, or it could be either?
Well, it could be either, and just because you put your property in a land trust doesn't mean you don't have liability anymore. The liability on the property held in a land trust flows through to the beneficiary. And that's the reason why most real estate investors make the beneficiary to their land trust an LLC or a corporation to get more asset protection.
Okay. And so, at a high level, the benefits of doing all that is to obviously to hide who the owner is.
Exactly.
And that's the primary thing you're trying to avoid there.
That's the primary goal, is anonymity of ownership, because as you know, you're very active in the real estate business, Mike, and you know that real estate investors are perceived, right or wrong, they're perceived by the general public as wealthy. And therefore, we are at a greater risk of being sued, rightly or wrongly, by, in particular, contingency fee lawyers that are out just looking for someone to settle a case for and make a few $1,000s.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can look up your name and find out what you own, that makes you more of a target. And let me give you an example of how our legal system works.
Can you really tell us that in a quick summary?
I can.
I know that's a complicated subject.
It is, but let's say I run over your dog. You go to your lawyer and want to sue me. Your lawyer says, "Well, what's that guy's name?" And you say Randy Hughes. He types in Randy Hughes, and the printer starts printing all these addresses that are in Randy Hughes's name. Now your lawyer looks at you, Mike, and says, "I think we got a pretty good case here."
Yeah.
Whereas if he types in my name and the printer doesn't budge, he looks at you and says, "Well, I'm not so sure I got a good case here, Mike, but if you just sit down and write me a check to my escrow account for $10,000, we'll get started on suing this guy."
Yeah.
So it's the difference between a contingency fee case and a case where you got to write a check. And now if you're going to write a check for 10 grand, chances are you may not want to sue me so bad. And that is the crux of it right there, is hard assets that the attorney can go after if they sue you and win.
I see. And there's a lot of people that use land trust as well, correct me if I'm wrong, to hide anonymity because maybe they're consolidating land or they don't want. I know one case was back in the day in Florida. Disney was scooping up all the land to create what ultimately was Disney World, but that was all done. They were trying to do it anonymously, so they did it with land trust. Is that's
right? Exactly true. And of course, on a smaller scale, I don't like people tracking what I'm doing, not because I'm doing anything illegal or immoral or fattening. It's just that it's none of your business what I'm doing in the business world, and it's none of my business what you're doing.
Right.
And if I'm doing everything in my name that gets recorded at the courthouse, you can track everything I do, what I buy, sure, what I pay for it, what I sell it for, and that's just not information that you're entitled to, in my opinion.
Yeah. And so, what are the other pros of land trusts? Besides, these are the main ones, but anything else that folks use land trust for?
Well, yeah. In fact, I get that question so much that I finally sat down and I wrote a booklet, and it's called 50 Reasons to Use a Land Trust.
Okay.
And if you don't mind, I'd be glad to give out my email address, and anybody listening to this, if they want to send me an email,
sure,
I'll send them that booklet for free.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Randy at mrlandtrust.net. So that's Randy at mrlandtrust.net. Okay. And just send me an email, ask for the booklet, 50 Reasons, and I'll send it to them. But there are many reasons, and there are reasons if the property's already in your name now, get it out of your name. Yes, the smartest way to buy real estate is to take title directly from the seller to your trust, so you're never in the chain of title. That's the smartest way, but if it's already in your name or your entity's name, deed it out. Get it out of there to the trust.
Yeah. Yeah, for folks, and this isn't intended to be a tax discussion here, but there's a million reasons to never put these things in your personal name anyway, right? You should always have some sort of legal entity that's holding these things. So
right.
Yeah.
Now, see, what's interesting, I always get this question, Mike. Well, my attorney tells me to put it in an LLC. And again, I use LLCs. I love LLCs and corporations, but not to hold title for a lot of reasons. One is an LLC and a corporation is registered in the state, so it's public information. Number two, didn't Grandma teach us all that we don't put our eggs in one basket? Mm-hmm. Now, does it really make sense for you to put 10 apartment buildings in one LLC and title it in the LLC? So if you've got a claim that's uninsured or underinsured on one apartment building, and that claim bleeds into the assets of the LLC, which they will if they're all titled in one entity, you just gave up more than you needed to. You just gave them everything. So it's one issue to lose one property to a lawsuit. It's stupid to lose multiple properties to a lawsuit when they're unrelated properties.
Yeah. Tell me about your experience, because it's interesting. I was taught early on, put right or wrong, put 8 to 10 properties, in my business primarily single family houses, into a legal entity and then form another legal entity, which then ultimately ends up creating an accounting nightmare because you have all these legal entities. But you know, then I know people that have hundreds of properties in one legal entity, and they say, I'm just going to buy extra insurance. So if I get sued, the insurance is going to take care of me. But every time I talk to somebody about this, and in all honesty, without getting too personal here, we've made a bunch of changes in my companies over the years by consolidating some rental entities, getting more insurance, things like that. But I've yet to talk to anybody that has really had a significant lawsuit on their hands where they kind of lost the property, or where it pierced the corporate veil and they got into, you know, lots of other assets that a real estate investor owns. Conceptually or academically, it could happen, but do you have any experiences with this where folks have really lost a lot of assets that they could have been protected by if they had done something differently?
Yeah, sure do. One that comes to mind right away is a friend of mine in Columbus, Ohio. He was a full-time policeman, part-time real estate investor, and he, over the years, got himself in a position where he had enough real estate to quit being a cop and just being a real estate investor full-time.
Great.
And one day he went to the mailbox and got a letter from an attorney that said, one of your tenant's children fell out of the window and wasn't killed but was permanently disabled. And we're going to sue you. And they did, because he was held responsible because he didn't have a screen in the window of that particular apartment. Now, I'm sure you go around every day, Mike, and check the screens in all your rentals to make sure they're in there and secure so no children fall out.
Yeah, those screens are really heavy duty too.
Yeah, they are, with bars. But here's the problem. I am a proponent of insurance. I say buy all you can stand, but realize that insurance doesn't cover every claim. Sure. Insurance companies are notorious for having exceptions to the coverage.
Yeah.
And the biggest issue is they don't cover defense costs. Mm-hmm. And those oftentimes are what will kill you, are just defending yourself from a lawsuit. Right. And they don't cover it. So, you know, insurance by itself isn't going to do it. And nobody's going to look after your assets like you are.
Right.
You know, your attorney's going to say, oh, don't worry about that. The odds are you won't get sued. Well, how many times does it have to happen to affect you? Once.
Right.
And
but in that example or any other examples, do you have where somebody then had access to other properties or other assets that person owned?
Well, yeah. What happened in this case is they sued him, and they took every one of his apartment buildings away from him and bankrupted him because the claim was in excess of the insurance coverage. Wow. And he went back to being a cop and a very depressed individual. Yeah. So these things really do happen. And here's the real kicker. Last year in America, 3% of the lawsuits went to trial. That means 97% were settled. Yeah. Most attorneys don't even know how to try a case. They just want to settle. And so that's to a large degree, since us real estate investors have a target on our back because we do have hard assets, we're more inclined to be sued for all kinds of frivolous reasons. Right. So, you know, you work hard, you take time away from your family learning how to build an estate. Doesn't it make sense to spend a little bit of time learning how to protect that estate? Absolutely, yeah. Now, do you advise folks to primarily use land trust for the purpose of assets they plan to keep long-term, like rental properties, or if they're, you know, flipping houses, buying, rehabbing, and reselling, do you also advocate using land trust for that as well? I do, because I don't think you should take title to any real estate in your name for one day. Yeah. You've got liability for one day or for 20 years. So since it doesn't cost anything to form a land trust, why not? Mm-hmm. Why not? Nobody can give me any good reasons to hold title to real estate in my name. Right. There are only negatives. There are no positives. Yeah. So if I've got an entity that gives me total privacy of ownership, that's not registered with the federal government, not registered with the state government, not registered with the IRS, there's no other entity out there that falls into that category. Sure. That I can form myself without a law degree for free. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. And how about how do lenders feel about them? If a lender's funding your deal and the property is in a land trust, how do they look at that?
Well, it depends on what kind of a lender you're dealing with. If you are dealing with a lender that's going to qualify your loan in the secondary market, they will not let you close directly into your trust. There are a few exceptions, like Illinois they'll let you close. But Bank of America, for example, will let you close 4 loans in Illinois, but not everybody lives in Illinois. So in general, they won't let you close into your trust. Now, that doesn't mean, the day after you close, you can't put it in trust for all the reasons, 50 reasons to do so.
Right.
But that's if you're getting a conventional loan. Now, we all know that the lenders will only let you have so many conventional loans. Bank of America, for example, only lets you have 4 conventional loans. And then after that, if you go in for your 5th loan, they say, sorry, we can't help you.
Right.
So if you're a mover and a shaker in this business, you're going to have more than 4 loans, and you're going to be forced into dealing with what I call a portfolio lender, which is a bank that keeps the loan in-house, and they will let you close directly into your trust.
Okay. Okay. And even if you don't, and maybe some lenders look down upon this, you could always deed the property over
after the fact.
After the fact, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what would you say some of the biggest misconceptions are with land trusts?
I hear those primarily through my students coming from their attorneys. And they'll say things like, well, don't use a land trust. They're old school. Use a LLC or a corporation. But I've also found that attorneys are not taught land trust law in law school. So 98% of them don't know anything about a land trust, and therefore don't recommend them because they don't know anything about them. I feel that if they used a land trust a few times and had some streetwise experience with them, they'd realize just how great a tool they are. And they're becoming a better and better tool as we go along in this post-Patriot Act world that we're living in, where the government is causing everything to be registered and tracked like the LLCs and corporations. They don't do that with the land trust. And I think that's a tremendous benefit to hold title in an entity that's not registered anywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
So the problem is going to somebody for advice and asking somebody for advice that really doesn't have knowledge to give you that advice. It's like if you came to me and asked me for advice on getting into investing in apartment buildings, I don't invest in apartment buildings. I'm a single family house guy.
Right.
So any advice I give you is probably not very good advice.
Right. Right.
But because my ego is such, I don't want to say, well, Mike, I don't know anything about apartment buildings. I go ahead and spout off and tell you, stay out of apartment buildings. They're terrible investments. That's not very good advice.
Right. Yeah. So talk a little bit about your business. I know you teach other people how to do this. Talk a little bit about what you do for others. Well,
about 15 years ago, I was encouraged by some local real estate investors to teach them how to use land trusts for all the reasons we've been talking about. And so I initially put together a seminar where I taught real estate investors in the Chicago area how to create their own land trust. You have to be an attorney if you're going to create land trusts for somebody else, but you do not have to be an attorney to create land trusts for yourself. So I teach real estate investors how to create their own land trusts and provide them the education and the forms they need, and they just load this up on their computer, and they thereafter, for the rest of their lives, can create all the land trusts they want at no cost.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. So that and over the last 15 years, I not only taught live seminars, but then I put it into a home study course because there are a lot of people that can't or don't want to attend a live seminar.
Yeah.
And so it's been reduced to a home study course with CDs, DVDs, and a course guide.
Okay. And one question I've been meaning to ask with land trusts, are they different by state? Are there ways to do this differently by state, or is it a universal method across the country?
Good question, Mike. There's no federal land trust law. It's all state by state. And there are only 6 states that actually have a land trust statute, but that doesn't mean you can't form a land trust in other states. For example, Texas, the state you're in, doesn't have a specific land trust statute, but they're legal. California does not have a land trust statute, but they're legal to form in California. Now, having said that, I'm in Illinois. I don't use Illinois land trusts. For a lot of reasons. It's too much to get into in this short period of time we have together. But some states have better laws than others. And so I like to use other states' laws to form trusts to hold property in my state. Now, we're kind of getting into some advanced techniques here.
Yeah.
But just think about that. I mean, if you're coming after me and the property's in Illinois and the trust is out of, say, Florida, and the beneficiary of the trust is my Nevada LLC, and now we've got 3 different states' laws here that all of a sudden kind of mucked up the system,
right?
And really ups the ante for any adversary that may be coming after me for some frivolous lawsuit.
Sure.
Mike, I don't teach people this information to take advantage of others or to avoid their just responsibilities. You know, if you owe money to somebody, pay them.
Right.
But that's not the way our legal system is going in this country, and you need to learn how to protect yourself from the frivolous lawsuits that are coming at real estate investors every day in America today.
Yeah, I've shared a few times. I don't talk about it a lot, but I've had a few lawsuits myself. Really, I went for years without having any, and then I've had 3, all very frivolous. And you know, like you said, one of them just eventually went away. Probably the most frivolous one. One of them we just settled because we didn't do anything wrong, but our attorney said you can continue to fight this, but it's going to cost you 3 or 4 times more. And then you always look like the bad, you know, you're the big company, like you say. It's like,
yeah.
Well, not really. It's my wife and I are real estate investors, but you know, just and you learn really fast how to protect yourself better with insurance or legal entities and maybe even land trusts as to how you can prevent those things from happening in the future. So
yeah, and I've avoided lawsuits myself just by having the property in a land trust because
right.
It makes it more difficult. And I've found that most of these contingency fee lawyers want something that's easy. They like easy money.
Yeah.
And once they just realize, hey, this isn't held in an individual's name, it's held in a trust, and I'm going to have to do some work, 99% of the time they go on down the road and find an easier sucker to hit
right.
than somebody that's going to present some work and some effort for them in the courts.
Sure. So aside from you kind of commented on the Patriot Act and avoiding, you know, a lot of registration type stuff that's happening across the country. You're going to have to start giving everybody your papers pretty soon. But
yeah.
Aside from that, we're supposed to be avoiding politics here, Randy. Is that talk a little bit about just where you see things going, even beyond that. I mean, we're becoming a more and more litigious society. It's easier to find stuff about people online than ever before. Just talk about. I'm sure that I'm throwing you a softball here, but it sounds like your belief is that land trusts are only going to make more and more sense as time goes by.
Well, it certainly has in my life. I mean, I started using these about 35 years ago, and at that point, everybody, including my wife, said I was paranoid schizophrenic. And now with identity theft, the legal system run amok. It's amazing how people have kind of come around and said, you know, that does make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And you know, just take the concept of identity theft. The identity thieves now can go online, find the mortgage you signed. They know your address. They can scan and take your signature right off that mortgage that you've signed and steal your identity. So just by using a land trust and not signing mortgages and documents that get recorded at the courthouse makes you less of a target for identity thieves.
Yeah.
Just let's talk about management, day-to-day management of real estate. And I give you a prime example. I had a tenant last summer who was a lady tenant in a complex of condos that I own, and the cops were being called all the time. and she was always at the heart of the trouble. So when her lease came up, we didn't renew it. And she was mad as a hornet. She wanted to know why. And I said, because the owner told us not to renew it. Well, who's the owner? I said, it's a trust, and we're not allowed to give you information on that. She looked up in the courthouse records who the owner was, the trustee anyway. Trustee just happened to be my attorney. She looked him up in the phone book, marched down to his office, and demanded to talk to him about her lease. And my attorney's secretary called me and said, what do you want me to do? And I said, throw her out. And if she won't leave voluntarily, call the police. But that just shows you to the extent that some of these tenants will go to. What if you're evicting a tenant? You know, I've been a landlord for 42 years. I have 2 daughters that fortunately are now grown, but for a long time would answer the door. Do you want someone who you're in the process of evicting, who's mad, who now has a carry and conceal permit, showing up at your door with your 7-year-old daughter answering the door?
Right.
Those are the kind of risks that you run when you own real estate in your name.
Yeah.
I had a lady call me last week from Florida. She said, Randy, how do I get your home study course? I need it fast. And I said, what's the hurry? She said, I own 7 rental properties down here, and one of my tenants is a man who's interested in me, and I'm not interested in him. And he's going to each one of my properties, because they're in my name, looking for me for my home.
Oh, geez.
So you just don't realize how important anonymity is until you get out in the real world and experience some of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Well, Randy, for folks that want to learn more, tell us how they get to your website to learn more about your home study course or just more general information about whether a land trust makes sense for them. Okay.
It's the website address is landtrustmadesimple.com. That's land trust, plural, with an S on it, landtrustmadesimple.com.
Okay, fantastic. And we'll add a link down below the video here so that anybody that's interested can find out how to get a hold of you.
Thank you.
So, Randy, very interesting subject, and definitely appreciate your time and sharing some of your knowledge with us today.
Glad to be on there. Thanks for inviting me, Mike.
Awesome. Well, next time I'm in the Champaign area, I'm going to look you up. Well, I don't know if I could find you, though.
Well, I probably won't be here, but I'll be somewhere, Mike.
Yeah. I won't try to find you through one of your properties, but that sounds like that'd be a dead end.
That'd be a dead end for sure. Yeah.
All right, Randy. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye. Are you a member of FlipNerd.com, the most robust real estate investing platform in existence, where you can find off-market wholesale deals and great vendors literally in your market? You can get access to advice from experts and learn about local clubs and events right in your backyard. If not, please visit FlipNerd.com and register for a free account. You can register in less than a minute. It's pretty much the coolest site that's ever existed in the real estate investing industry, so get on over to FlipNerd.com.